Listening. Skill 7, number 6. Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
Today I'd like to talk a bit about the concept of object permanence, which was first described by Jean Piaget in his theory of cognitive development of how children's thinking skills develop as they grow up. Piaget was the first to study children's thinking and to develop a theory about it. You'll recall that he defined 4 stages of cognitive development in children. Let's review quickly. The development of the concept of object permanence occurs during the first stage, which Piaget called what? Who can tell me?
Wasn't it pre-operational? No, wait, hang on. It was sensory motor. The sensory motor stage is from birth until about 2 years old, right?
Exactly right. The sensory motor stage, which we'll be looking at more closely in a minute, is how Piaget described the first 2 years of life. This is when children are developing motor skills and learning how to interact with the physical world around them. Then, from age 2 to around age 6, Piaget called that stage of development the pre-operational stage.
Because it comes before the operational stage.
Almost. Concrete operational is how Piaget described the next stage, the stage after pre-operational. During this time, children are able to perform more concrete mental operations. Then, around age 12, they move into what Piaget called the formal operational stage, where they develop more abstract thinking skills. Okay, so those are the 4 stages of cognitive development as described by Piaget. Let's go back to the sensory motor stage. As we've said, this is the stage of development from birth until 2 years of age. During this time, at around 8 or 9 months old usually, Piaget said that's when babies develop the concept of object permanence. What is object permanence?
It's when there's an object and the baby sees it and then you take it away. When the baby understands that the object still exists even though he or she can't see it, that's what Piaget called object permanence.
Correct. The baby knows that objects have permanence, that they continue to exist even when they're out of the baby's sight. Piaget experimented with this by hiding objects behind a curtain. He showed a baby, an infant, very young, an object such as a toy that the baby enjoyed looking at. Then he, Piaget that is, hid the toy behind the curtain. Infants who hadn't yet developed the concept of object permanence, who were still too young, they acted like the toy didn't exist. They didn't try to reach for it at all. According to Piaget, a baby who had developed this concept, who knew objects were permanent, would try to reach for a toy that had been hidden. Okay, so for a long time, this was how cognitive development was seen, according to the stages Piaget described. Then, in the 1970s and 80s, researchers began looking at these stages more closely. What they were questioning was the timing that Piaget outlined. Piaget's experiments with object permanence in particular, researchers wondered if perhaps children developed this concept at an earlier age than Piaget had said. That maybe younger babies had the concept, but were still lacking in the motor skills to demonstrate it. Piaget's experiment required the baby to reach behind the screen to demonstrate that it knew the toy was there. It required the baby to be able to coordinate its movements with its thoughts. So, later researchers decided to design an experiment that could be done with younger babies, babies that had not yet developed a certain level of motor skills. Renée Baillargeon and her colleagues designed an experiment that relied on the tendency of babies to look at things that are new or interesting to them. It was really quite a brilliant idea they had, a great research design. They designed an experiment that showed objects moving across a screen. The babies in the experiment looked longer when an object that had been on the screen appeared to be hidden, thus showing, according to the researchers, that they could remember the existence of an object that was no longer visible. So, the research appeared to show that babies as young as 4 months already have the concept of object permanence, that they developed this concept earlier than they develop motor skills, such as being able to